Today's sermon is about grace, and every week we unpack some aspect of the great shalom. And there are many, and grace is part of God's peace. It's part of how God shares his love with us and how we share God's love with others. And grace is, in essence, it's giving. It's giving freely of our money, of our time, of our talent, and it's about expressing our love for God's creation and receiving that love from God and sharing it with others. And so today, we're going to look more closely at this issue of grace as it relates more specifically to giving money. Jesus is about to launch another dimension of his ministry with his 12 disciples this morning. He has set the stage. He has organized his ministry in a way that the disciples will go into a variety of different towns to begin to share the good news, to bring healing and hope to those who have little. But he specifically says to his disciples, now, as you are prepared to do the work, but here's the thing, I want you to go out. You're going to leave our common purse behind. You're not taking any money. You're not taking extra clothes. You're not taking anything. You are going to simply go and begin to prepare to serve. And this is then going to, our ministry to move forward will depend on the grace of others. It will be dependent on the ability of those who recognize the value of what we are trying to do, and they will begin to support it. And so in this case, what we're looking for, what Jesus is looking for, it's not necessarily money per se, but it's food, clothing, and shelter, which in our era or day would still probably have to be converted into some way of contributing financially to the cause. Jesus is, I'm really, as someone who's more in the social sciences and political sciences and stuff, I'm always fascinated by how Jesus organizes ministry and the purpose that he does things. Why does he do the things he does? Why does he say the things he says? He's always thinking about how can we create opportunities for people to, one, receive God's love and also to share it. So he sends them out with nothing. And he recognized there is a human need for people to contribute to ministry. It's embedded in our hearts and our minds. It's part of our intuition, really, to give. It's something that is there. And so for Jesus, the thing is this. Now, if you can't get support, you're not going to do ministry in that town. You're going to leave. No money, no ministry. No support, no ministry. And he lays that out very, very clearly and recognizes that to build a community of compassion, we need a variety of different people. And so the art of asking, or the act of asking, in this case when the disciples knock on the door or wherever they do, they are asking people to become involved. And people are going to make a decision. They're going to become involved or they're not. They're going to give of what they have or they're not. And so grace is the act of welcoming. It's the act of giving. It's allowing ourselves to dive more deeply into the dimension of peace in that aspect of the great shalom. Now, without this grace, even in the early evidence of Jesus' work, there would be no ministry. It would shut down. Throughout Jesus' ministry, there are benefactors. There are people who are supporting. There is the common purse. And that's the way things work. And somehow they have enough. But in the end, as we look at the spiritual dimension of what we're talking about, it is through grace, through God's grace, God's gift to us that we have received, they have received the gift of giving. It's a gift to be able to give, to be able to joyfully give, to trust, to hope, to believe, to engage. It's part of who and what we are. Well, that was then. And this is now. This is now. We get back to the issue of money, and it's a topic that gives many people discomfort, and probably most pastors too, talking about money. But yet, money is, in the end, essential to the work that we do. And as someone who, I get it. I understand in part why people push back. Part of it has to do with spiritual development. Maybe they're not ready yet. Maybe we haven't matured in this particular way. But on the other hand, it's part of that for sure. But it's also a part of the fact that in our society, we've seen evidence of lots of mismanagement. Lots of mismanagement. And it can have an impact on whether we're intentionally, we hear these stories in the media and this and that and the other thing, and it makes you start to kind of wonder a little bit in the back of your mind. It can cloud your perspective. It can cloud my perspective. And the interesting thing, years ago, through the PR firm of Anthony Franco, I was a special guest from time to time on J.P. McCarthy's morning show. And the only time I was called was when there was a story in the media about some charity that did some terrible thing. And so I'm invited to come in and to talk about that. And it happened like 6 times over 4 years or something like that. And what I always tried to say, and JP would let me say, I said, listen, okay, this is real. What happened is wrong. It needs to be corrected. But, there is an incredible amount of good work that's going on in the charitable sector. Stuff happening every day in the church and in charities all over the country, all over the world that we don't really even hear about, we don't even think about. It's certainly not front page news. And we need to remember that while the good work is getting done, maybe we pay too much attention to these problems, yet they're very real. So we're placed in a position, I guess, friends, where the need for us to more fully understand and identify God's work and will in our life needs to continue to be explored and to be worked on. Each one of us have our own job to do in this regard, and certainly in part it has to do with giving. And we need to recognize, and I think on some level just accept, because there's not much we can do about it, that there is dysfunction, no surprise, in the world. There's dysfunction in business. There's dysfunction in charitable work. There's dysfunction in the church. There's dysfunction in government. Where there are people, there will be some measure of dysfunction. But that dysfunction should not stop us from moving forward and proclaiming God's love. It does lead to cynicism, those dysfunctions. We can put too much attention on it. Bad news travels much faster than good news throughout the ages. There's something about how we're wired that we just kind of get into that a little bit. But we have to recognize that the cynicism that can be created in our souls puts a governor on our ability to give. It can just do that. So it's something we need to pay attention to and explore spiritually and muse about these things. And so, sure, there is dysfunction, but there's a whole lot of good stuff going on. We also live in a society that tries to redefine wants into needs. Our society tries to redefine wants into needs. You need this or that to be a complete person, whatever that is. And it's part of what we negotiate in life. It's part of the atmospherics of life. And it becomes a challenge to distinguish needs from wants. That in and of itself is a mountain to climb. That is not insignificant. It's easy to get swept into things. And we need to recognize as wants and needs get redefined, that it can reduce our capacity to love and give. By its nature, it will begin to reduce our capacity to freely share. And so, for some of us, we carry those questions of trust and the world into our idea about giving. It's part of our reality. The potential to change the world through God's grace is always present. God is always moving into us and inviting us to take another step forward. Our challenge is to be mindful of the world we live in. Be mindful of the challenges we uniquely face, and to explore how we might move forward. One thing I have always recommended for myself, and I will recommend for you, is that when I'm looking at various dimensions of shalom, whether it's compassion or grace or forgiveness or justice or whatever I'm looking at, if I'm feeling inadequate to, I just don't want to go there. I don't want to deal with this. I just want to shut down. I invite each of us to pray to God, and to reflect and to become earnest in our prayers, to ask God to increase our appetite. God, increase my appetite to properly give, to properly receive, to properly engage in the work of God. Increase my appetite. Give me the eyes and the ears and the heart to really feel this. I know you're with me. In the end, God, Jesus, is looking for happy, joyful givers. Happy and joyful, fulfilled, connected. God is not looking for any of us to become enslaved. That's not God. But God does want our happiness and recognizes that when we explore all of the dimensions of shalom and take some steps forward, we will experience a happiness that is unique in each of our lives. And we begin to see the world a little bit differently. Just like Ashley was saying with the girls today, it's all God's. It's all God's. I'm part of that. I'm part of that. God is speaking to me and inviting me to take that next step as a good parent would for any of his children. Take that next step, whatever it might be. Don't be afraid. It's going to be okay. And so, my friends, we look at the great peace, we look at grace, we look at the volunteerism that takes place, and we attempt to be honest with ourselves and each other and God, and we move into that happy space, that joyful space, that space that says, yes, this is a life worth living, it's a life worth celebrating, and we all have an opportunity to receive and share the benefits of this beautiful kingdom. Amen.